Our reading this morning is from Matthew's Gospel, and it contains words that perhaps we wouldn't always use today. Words such as demon-possessed. The Bible records several other instances of demon possession and exorcisms that performed by Jesus. In Luke, we read how Jesus cast out an impure spirit from a man in Capernaum. And then again in Matthew, where Jesus heals a man who was demon-possessed. He was blind and he was mute. And then a little bit later in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is recorded as healing a boy who was frequently, we are told, throwing himself into fires and water by a spirit. I just want to read to you now Matthew's Gospel, chapter 8. Again, it talks of men possessed by demons. When Jesus came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demonic men coming out of the tombs met him. They were so fierce that no one could pass that way. Suddenly they shouted, "What have you to do with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now a large herd of swine was feeding at some distance from them. The demons begged him, "If you cast us out, send us into the herd of swine." And he said to them, "Go." So they came out and entered the swine, and suddenly the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and perished in the water. The swineherders ran off, and on going into the town, they told the whole story about what had happened to the demonics. Then the whole town came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to leave their neighborhood. And after getting into a boat, he crossed the water and came to his own town. Does that worry you, what we've just read? Are you indeed frightened, perhaps, by it? I wonder if we, like many in the Bible, what would we do? Do we often try to avoid such people? The region of the Gadarenes is situated on the southeast side of the Sea of Galilee, near the town of Gerard, one of the most important cities in the region. The area was largely inhabited by Gentiles, which explains the herd of pigs. The Jews did not keep pigs because pigs were considered unclean and therefore unfit to eat. Demon-possessed people, perhaps under the control of one or more demons, were thought to be fallen angels who joined Satan in his rebellion against God and are now evil spirits, all under the control of Satan. They help Satan tempt people to sin, and they have great destructive powers. But whenever they are confronted by Jesus, they lose that power. These demons, in today's reading, recognize Jesus as God's Son, but they don't think that they had to obey him. Just believing is not enough. Faith is more than belief. By faith, we accept what Jesus has done for us. We receive him as the only one who can save us from sin. and we are called to live out our faith by obeying his commands. It's interesting at this point, I think, to look a little deeper at the Jewish ceremonial laws. The men that Jesus encountered that morning were unclean in 3 ways. Firstly, they were Gentiles. They were non-Jews, and they were demon-possessed. They lived in a graveyard. Gentiles, demon-possessed, and living in a graveyard. None of this stopped Jesus offering a hand of help, offering them all the healing and cleansing that he could. We should never, ever turn our backs on people we consider unclean, or who make us feel uncomfortable, or who we think violate our moral standards and religious beliefs. Instead, we must realize that every human individual is a creation of God, needing to be touched by his love. In fact, touched by us as we allow God to work through us. The men, living in the graveyard and thought to be demon-possessed, asked Jesus if he had come to torment them before the appointed time. It showed that they knew their ultimate fate. They knew that when the demons entered the pigs, they would be driven into the sea. The demons' action proved there was indeed a destructive intent. If they could not destroy the men, then they would destroy the pigs. Jesus' action, by contrast, shows the value he places on each human life. When this was done, the men were left feeling as if they had something to offer society. But there was still unrest. They heard their friends and colleagues asking Jesus to leave. What were they afraid of? Perhaps, unlike their own pagan gods, Jesus could not be contained, controlled, or appeased. They now feared Jesus, as they thought it to be, someone with supernatural powers, a power that they had never ever witnessed before. Also, the people, I suspect, were rather upset about losing a whole herd of pigs, rather than being glad about the deliverance of the demon-possessed men. I guess that brings us to think perhaps a little bit about what concerns us. What are we concerned about? Are we concerned about property more than people? But let's never forget that human beings are created in God's image and indeed do have a special value. How foolish, and yet how easy it is to value possessions, investments, and even animals above human life. We need to be willing to let Jesus work through us, where together we can finish his work of bringing all into God's wonderful kingdom. Amen.